third party lost control when he finally connected everything that had happened. Now I understand why you were. My beloved child, something has finally clicked into place, and the moment it did, the third party could no longer look at the past the same way. Every strange silence, every unexpected change, every moment your soulmate seemed emotionally somewhere else, he started connecting them one by one. At first, they looked like separate pieces with no meaning. Then one small detail brought everything together, and suddenly the entire story looked different. Now I understand why you were. Those words came out slowly because what he had finally understood was much bigger than he expected. Your soulmate had never completely disconnected from what they felt for you. Even while trying to move forward, something kept pulling their thoughts back toward you. And the third party finally recognized the pattern. Don't skip, because the most surprising piece was not what your soulmate had done, it was what they had quietly refused to do. Something huge is waiting for you, and when you understand this next part, the entire connection between the title and what happened will become clear. For a long time, the third party believed your soulmate's distance was random. Maybe they were simply tired. Maybe they needed space. Maybe their heart was becoming quieter. But then he remembered the conversations that suddenly ended whenever the future was mentioned. He remembered how your soulmate could appear completely present and then become unusually thoughtful after hearing a certain song, seeing a familiar place, or being reminded of an old chapter. And then came the detail that changed everything. Your soulmate had been avoiding one specific question, not because they didn't know the answer, but because they knew it too well. The question was simple: if you could choose again, would you make the same choice? Your soulmate never gave a clear answer. That silence suddenly meant something. The third party connected it with everything else, and the realization hit him all at once. Now I understand why you were never fully here. Stay till the end, because even that realization was only the surface. There was another truth underneath it, one your soulmate had never spoken directly, and it explained why their behavior kept contradicting their words. Then came the once-in-a-lifetime revelation he never expected to uncover. Your soulmate had not been confused about who mattered to them. They had been struggling with what to do about feelings that never completely disappeared. That was why certain memories still carried weight. That was why conversations about commitment felt different. That was why your name, or even something connected to you, could quietly change their entire mood. The third party finally understood that he had been watching the evidence for much longer than he realized. The pieces had always been there, he simply hadn't known what picture they created. And now that he could see it, there was no easy way to unsee it. But don't skip, because one final piece still hadn't been connected, and that piece was about you. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate had made one private decision long before this realization happened, and when the third party discovers what that decision was, he will finally understand why every road in this story seemed to lead back to the same person. There was one detail he still couldn't explain, and once he found it, everything he thought he understood changed again. The third party kept replaying your soulmate's words, their pauses, their strange reactions whenever the past appeared in conversation. Something didn't fit. If your soulmate had truly moved on emotionally, why did certain questions make them hesitate? Why did they become unusually quiet whenever someone mentioned genuine connection, unfinished feelings, or the person they once imagined building a future with? Then he remembered one conversation he had almost forgotten. Your soulmate had been asked what they would change if they could return to one important moment in their life. They didn't mention money. They didn't mention success. They didn't mention some ordinary missed opportunity. They simply became silent, looked away, and said, "There is one choice I would make differently." That sentence suddenly returned with completely different meaning. Don't skip, because he was finally beginning to understand exactly which choice they meant. And once he connected that sentence with everything else, he realized the story had never really been about forgetting you. It had been about trying to live with a decision their heart had never fully accepted, but something even more surprising happened next. The third party started noticing that your soulmate had unconsciously protected one part of their past from being replaced. There were memories they refused to speak negatively about. There were questions about you they never answered completely. And whenever someone tried to convince them that what happened between you meant nothing anymore, they never fully agreed. That was when another piece fell into place. Your soulmate wasn't holding on to an imaginary perfect past, they were holding on to the meaning of what they once felt. And suddenly the third party understood why comparisons had quietly existed all along. Your soulmate had been measuring certain emotional moments against something they had experienced before, and those comparisons kept leading back toward you. Stay till the end, because this is where the revelation becomes much deeper. He finally asked your soulmate the question nobody had asked directly enough: when you imagine the life you genuinely wanted, who was supposed to be standing beside you? Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said more than a rushed answer ever could. Something huge is waiting for you, because what followed wasn't the response he expected. Your soulmate finally admitted that there had been a version of their future they once saw clearly, and losing that possibility affected more decisions than anyone knew. Suddenly, the third party understood the unfinished sentence that had been circling in his mind: "Now I understand why you were always looking backward whenever we talked about moving forward." He wasn't talking about physically looking somewhere else. He meant emotionally. Every time the future became serious, your soulmate seemed to revisit an unanswered chapter inside themselves. And now he finally understood why. But don't skip, because the biggest piece still hasn't surfaced. The third party believed he had discovered the entire truth, yet there was one thing your soulmate had deliberately kept private, not because they wanted to deceive anyone, but because saying it aloud would force them to admit something they weren't ready to face. Something huge is waiting for you. That hidden truth concerns a promise your soulmate quietly made to themselves after everything changed between you, and once that promise is revealed, every strange decision they made afterward will finally make sense. What surfaced next was the one piece nobody had been looking for, because it wasn't hidden inside a conversation, it was hidden inside a decision your soulmate had quietly carried for much longer than anyone realized. After everything changed between you, your soulmate made a private promise to themselves: they would never again make a life-changing choice simply because other people expected it from them. At first, that promise seemed unrelated to you. But when the third party connected it with the hesitation, the unfinished answers, and the way your soulmate reacted whenever the future became serious, he suddenly understood. That promise had been born from regret. Your soulmate had learned something from losing what once mattered deeply, and they had been carrying that lesson into every decision afterward. Don't skip, because this is where everything begins turning in a completely unexpected direction. The third party had assumed your soulmate's distance meant uncertainty about the future. Now he realized it might mean the opposite. Your soulmate was becoming certain about what they could no longer pretend didn't matter. And there was one name silently connected to that realization: yours. Something huge is waiting for you, because he still hadn't discovered what your soulmate had done after making that promise. Then another forgotten moment returned to him with startling clarity. Months earlier, your soulmate had said something that seemed ordinary at the time: "Next time I choose something that changes my life, I need to know I'm choosing it because it feels true to me." Nobody questioned those words. Nobody understood where they came from. But now the third party did. He connected that sentence to every conversation your soulmate avoided, every future plan they hesitated to confirm, and every time their expression changed when someone mentioned the possibility of reconnecting with a person from the past. Suddenly, he could see the pattern completely. "Now I understand why you were questioning everything." Those words changed the atmosphere because your soulmate didn't immediately deny them. Stay till the end, because their silence was followed by something even more revealing. Your soulmate finally said, "I wasn't questioning everything. I was questioning whether I had ignored something important." That distinction changed everything. The third party had believed he was watching someone become confused. Instead, he had been watching someone become clearer. And the clearer your soulmate became, the harder it was for them to ignore the emotional truth they had buried beneath practical choices. But the most surprising revelation was still waiting. The third party asked one final question: "If you already know what you ignored, why haven't you done anything about it?" Your soulmate paused. And this time the silence felt different. That it wasn't uncertainty. It was the silence of someone deciding how much truth they were finally willing to reveal. Then came the answer: "Because I don't know whether I still have the right to return to something I once walked away from." Don't skip. That sentence explains why your soulmate had remained caught between realization and action. Their biggest question was no longer whether the connection mattered. Their question was whether you would ever see them the same way again. Something huge is waiting for you, because the third party suddenly understood that your soulmate's greatest hesitation wasn't about choosing between two people. It was about whether the door they once left behind was still open at all. And just when he thought there could be nothing bigger left to discover, your soulmate revealed that they had already taken one quiet step toward finding out, one step nobody around them had noticed yet. The quiet step your soulmate had already taken was so subtle that nobody noticed it at first, yet it revealed more than every conversation before it. They had begun returning to the places, memories, and small details connected to the chapter they once shared with you, not because they wanted to live in the past, but because they were finally trying to understand why that chapter still felt unfinished. The third party noticed the pattern only after connecting everything. Suddenly, the unusual silences made sense. The hesitation made sense. Even the way your soulmate reacted whenever someone asked what they truly wanted began making sense. "Now I understand why you were searching for answers," he finally said. But your soulmate corrected him with one sentence: "I wasn't searching for an answer. I think I already knew it. I was searching for the courage to accept it." Don't skip, because that sentence changed the entire meaning of what had been happening. The third party had assumed your soulmate was trying to forget something. Instead, they had been testing whether the feeling that remained was simply nostalgia, or something much deeper. And what they discovered surprised even them. Time had changed many things, but it had never completely erased the emotional significance of you. Then came the moment that made every remaining piece fall into place. The third party asked, "If you already understand what you feel, what exactly are you waiting for?" Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. They looked down, gathered their thoughts, and finally said, "I need to know that I'm not returning just because I miss what was. I need to know I'm ready to create something better than what we lost." Stay till the end, because this was the first time your soulmate stopped speaking about you as merely part of their past. Their words were suddenly about possibility. About rebuilding. About becoming different enough to approach an old connection with new understanding. And that realization surprised the third party more than anything else. He finally understood that your soulmate's recent emotional shift wasn't happening because somebody had convinced them of something. It was happening because all the choices, memories, and unanswered questions had finally led them toward the same conclusion. Something huge is waiting for you, because there was still one question your soulmate hadn't answered. If they truly wanted another chance, what were they actually prepared to do differently this time? And the answer came in a way nobody expected. Your soulmate said they would no longer hide behind timing, pride, or other people's expectations. They understood that meaningful connections could not survive forever on unspoken feelings. But don't skip, because they revealed one more thing. The quiet step they had taken wasn't simply revisiting memories. They had begun preparing the words they would say if they ever had the opportunity to speak honestly with you again. Not a dramatic promise. Not an excuse. Just the truth about what they finally understood after connecting their own past choices. The third party listened, stunned, because those words completed the sentence that had started everything. Now I understand why you were never able to treat this like it meant nothing. Your soulmate didn't disagree. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is one final detail about those prepared words that even the third party doesn't know yet. Your soulmate has decided that if the moment ever arrives, they won't begin by asking you to return. They will begin by admitting the one thing they should have admitted long ago, and that admission could completely change how you understand everything that happened between you. The admission your soulmate has been preparing begins with something far more powerful than, "I miss you." It begins with accountability. They finally understand that what happened between you cannot be rewritten by pretending the difficult moments never existed. And that is exactly what surprised the third party when another piece of the truth surfaced. Your soulmate had privately rehearsed the words they wished they had spoken when everything first changed. "I should have told you what I was really feeling instead of expecting you to understand my silence." Suddenly, the third party went completely quiet. Now he understood why your soulmate had been revisiting old conversations in their mind. They weren't searching for a way to blame you. They were recognizing the moments when fear, confusion, outside expectations, and unspoken emotions had created distance where honesty might have created understanding. Don't skip, because the revelation gets even bigger. Your soulmate realized that the connection didn't become meaningful only after it was gone. It had always been meaningful. They simply understood its value differently once they could see the entire story from the other side. Something huge is waiting for you, because there was one specific moment they remembered that changed how they viewed everything. That moment was surprisingly small. It wasn't a grand event. It was a conversation where you had apparently given them space to say what they truly wanted, and instead of speaking honestly, your soulmate held something back. For a long time, they told themselves that silence had protected everyone from complications. Now they saw it differently. That silence had created an unanswered question that followed them forward. The third party finally connected this memory with everything he had witnessed and said, "Now I understand why you were never comfortable when that period came up." Your soulmate answered, "Because I knew there was more I should have said." Stay till the end, because what came next was the most surprising part. Your soulmate wasn't planning to return with demands or expectations. They wanted one honest conversation where nothing important remained hidden. For the first time, they were thinking less about controlling the outcome and more about telling the truth clearly. And inside that truth was something they had never expressed properly. Losing the connection taught them what they valued, what they feared, and what they would never again take for granted, but one final realization left the third party with almost nothing to say. He asked your soulmate, "What if you finally tell them everything and they choose a different path?" Your soulmate paused, but their answer showed just how much had changed. "Then at least they will finally know the truth from me." Don't skip, because that answer revealed that this was no longer about winning, competing, or proving something. Your soulmate had reached the point where honesty mattered more than certainty. Something huge is waiting for you. There is still one part of that truth they haven't revealed, even to the third party. It concerns the exact moment they first realized their feelings for you had never completely disappeared. That moment happened when they least expected it, and once you hear what triggered it, you'll understand why everything began changing so quickly afterward. Because the third party may have finally connected the past, but your soulmate has been connecting something even bigger, what they want their next chapter to look like, and who keeps appearing whenever they imagine it. The moment your soulmate finally recognized what had remained inside them didn't happen during some dramatic conversation. It happened during an ordinary moment when nobody was asking them about you at all. Someone casually started talking about the kind of person who makes you feel understood without needing everything explained, and your soulmate suddenly became unusually quiet. One memory surfaced, then another, and before they could push those thoughts away, they realized every memory was pointing toward the same person. You. That was the moment they stopped asking themselves why the past occasionally returned and started asking a much bigger question: why had the emotional meaning of that connection survived everything that came afterward? Don't skip, because the third party eventually discovered this moment too, and it completed another missing piece. "Now I understand why you were different after that day," he said. Your soulmate didn't argue. Something huge is waiting for you, because what changed that day wasn't simply their mood. It was the way they began looking at every decision they had made since you became distant. From that point forward, your soulmate started comparing who they had been then with who they had become now. They saw mistakes they hadn't recognized before. They understood conversations differently. Most importantly, they realized that if they ever received another opportunity to speak with you, they didn't want to return as the same person who once struggled to communicate clearly. Stay till the end, because this is where the third party finally understood the part that had bothered him from the beginning. Your soulmate wasn't suddenly changing because of one memory. They had been changing gradually, and that ordinary moment simply made them recognize what all those changes meant. "So that's why you kept saying you needed to become certain before making another big decision," he said. And your soulmate gave him the answer he never expected: "I wasn't trying to decide who mattered. I was trying to decide whether I had become capable of handling what mattered differently." That sentence changed everything. The issue had never been simply choosing one direction over another. Your soulmate was questioning whether they were finally ready to stop repeating the patterns that had created distance before. Then the third party asked the question that brought the entire story back to you. If you had one completely honest conversation with them right now, what would you say first? Your soulmate became silent. Not because they had no answer, but because they had apparently thought about that exact question many times. Finally, they said, "Would tell them I understand now what I couldn't understand then." Don't skip, because there was more. They would explain why they became distant, what they misunderstood, and why certain choices that once seemed sensible eventually felt incomplete. But they would also admit something much deeper. You had become connected in their mind not merely with something they lost, but with something that taught them what genuine emotional clarity felt like. Something huge is waiting for you, because the third party finally connected everything that had happened, but one question remained unanswered. Would your soulmate keep these realizations private forever, or would they finally turn understanding into action? And just when it seemed impossible for the story to shift again, your soulmate made one decision that suggested the waiting might finally be coming to an end. The decision your soulmate made was quiet, deliberate, and completely different from everything they had done before. They decided that if an opportunity appeared to speak with you honestly, they would stop hiding behind unfinished explanations. No more pretending the past had become meaningless simply because time had passed. No more allowing other voices to define something only the two of you could truly understand. The third party could sense that something had shifted, because your soulmate was no longer speaking in uncertain phrases. Their words had become calm and clear. "Now I understand why you were," he began again. But this time your soulmate finished the thought for him, "because I was trying to convince myself I had already accepted something I never fully understood." Don't skip, because this was the moment every scattered piece finally formed one complete picture. The distance, the hesitation, the memories, the unanswered questions, they were no longer separate mysteries. Your soulmate had been moving toward one realization for much longer than anyone knew. Some chapters don't need to be repeated, but they do need to be understood before anyone can genuinely move forward. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate had finally decided exactly what they wanted you to know if that conversation ever happened. They wanted you to know that their silence was never proof that you meant nothing. They wanted you to understand that certain decisions were made before they possessed the clarity they have now. Most surprisingly, they weren't imagining a conversation where they arrived with promises about what must happen next. They imagined simply sitting across from you and saying everything that had remained unfinished. Stay till the end, because the third party asked the question that tested this realization completely. What if hearing the truth doesn't change anything? Your soulmate answered without hesitation, "Then the truth still deserves to be spoken." And suddenly the third party understood why everything had changed. This wasn't about forcing an ending or demanding a new beginning. It was about refusing to let silence keep writing the story. Your soulmate had reached a point where being understood mattered more than appearing unaffected. Don't skip, because one final revelation remained. The words they had prepared ended with a sentence they had never been able to admit before. "I didn't understand what your place in my life meant until I had enough distance to see what never disappeared." And that was when the third party finally connected everything that had happened. The moments he had dismissed as random, the pauses he couldn't explain, the future conversations that never felt complete, each one had been pointing toward the same unresolved truth. But something even more important had changed. Your soulmate was no longer looking backward simply to recover what was lost. They were looking backward to understand themselves well enough to make their next choice differently. Something huge is waiting for you.